The rain in Atlanta that night wasn't just falling, it was slashing sideways, turning the city into a blur of neon reflections and wet pavement. Naomi Carter sat in her beat-up Toyota, the engine silent, her fingers still clenched around the steering wheel long after she'd parked. The glowing sign of the Grand Lux Hotel loomed ahead, its golden letters a cruel mockery through the downpour. 10 minutes earlier, she'd walked in her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, only to be met with a dismissive glance from the front desk clerk. "We require a credit card for incidentals," the woman had said, her voice dripping with condescension. No card, no room. Never mind that Naomi had $80 in cash carefully saved from her last paycheck. Never mind that her shoes were soaked through from the walk across the parking lot. Policy was policy. Back in the car, the smell of damp fabric and old fast food wrappers filled the air. Naomi exhaled, watching her breath fog up the windshield. At 25, she was used to being invisible, another black woman in a city that looked right through her. But tonight, something snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, unshakable resolve settling into her bones. One day, she promised herself she'd own a place where no one would ever be turned away because of their skin or their wallet. 12 years later, Naomi Carter wasn't just a name on a reservation list. She was the force behind Horizon Hospitality, a chain of boutique hotels known for their inclusivity and elegance. Her face graced the cover of Business Insider, and her TED Talk on breaking barriers in the hospitality industry had gone viral. But success had a funny way of distorting reality. These days, people tripped over themselves to please her, holding doors, offering compliments, treating her like royalty. It made her skin crawl. She didn't want the red carpet treatment. She wanted the truth. So last Thursday, she booked a room at one of her own hotels under a fake name. No entourage, no special requests. Just Naomi the way it used to be. The clerk at the front desk, a young man with a practiced smile, barely looked up as she approached. "ID and credit card, please," he said, his tone robotic. Naomi slid them across the counter, her heart pounding. For a moment she was back in that rain-soaked Toyota clutching her duffel bag. Then the clerk's eyes flickered to her name on the reservation. His smile froze. "Ms. Carter," he stammered, suddenly flustered. I didn't recognize you." Naomi held his gaze, her voice steady. "Exactly." The air between them crackled with tension. Behind her, the lobby buzzed with guests, oblivious to the quiet reckoning unfolding at the front desk. Naomi took her key card without a word, the plastic edge digging into her palm as she turned toward the elevators. Kevin, the security guard, took a half-step forward, his hand hovering near his radio just in case. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped inside, catching her reflection in the mirrored walls. The woman staring back wore the same gray sweater and jeans she'd worn 12 years ago when she'd been turned away from a different hotel. The only difference now was the weight in her chest, heavy as stone. Her room was on the 12th floor, a corner suite with a view of the city. The moment the door clicked shut, Naomi dropped her bag and walked to the window. The skyline glittered, indifferent. She picked up the phone and dialed room service, ordering a pot of coffee black, no sugar. When it arrived, the waiter, a young Latino man, set the tray down with a polite nod. His eyes flickered to her face, then away just as quickly. "Will there be anything else, ma'am?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. Naomi hesitated. "Actually," she said, "I'd love a slice of your pecan pie. I heard it's the best in the city." His posture relaxed slightly. "It is," he admitted, a small, genuine smile breaking through. "My abuela's recipe." The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds, but it was the first time since she'd walked in that someone had looked at her, really looked at her, without calculation. An hour later, she ventured back downstairs, this time heading for the bar. The pianist was still playing the notes, soft and melancholy. She took a seat at the far end where the light was dimmest, The bartender, a white man in his 40s with a salt and pepper beard, glanced at her once before turning back to polishing glasses. Naomi waited and waited. Finally, she raised a hand. He sighed as if inconvenienced and sauntered over. "What'll it be?" She ordered a whiskey neat. He poured it without comment, sliding the glass across the bar with a thud that sent liquid sloshing over the rim. Across the room, a group of businessmen laughed loudly, their drinks refilled before the ice could even melt. Naomi took a slow sip, the burn of the alcohol doing nothing to dull the sharper sting of the truth. This wasn't just about a credit card or a reservation. It was about who belonged and who didn't. She pulled out her phone and opened the Horizon Hospitality employee app, scrolling to the feedback form. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she stopped. This wasn't something a form could fix. She stood abruptly, leaving the whiskey half-finished. As she passed the front desk, Lauren was now chatting animatedly with another guest, a white woman in a designer dress. "Oh, we'll take care of everything for you, Mrs. Whitmore," Lauren gushed. "Your usual suite is ready." Naomi slowed her steps just enough to catch Lauren's eye. For a split second, the woman's smile faltered. Recognition flickered, not of Naomi as the CEO, but of the unease that came with being watched. Outside, the rain had started again. Naomi didn't hurry to her car. She stood under the awning, letting the mist kiss her face. The hotel's sign glowed behind her, a beacon of luxury built on a promise she'd made to herself years ago. Tomorrow, there would be meetings, terminations, training. But tonight, there was just the quiet, crushing realization that some battles couldn't be won with Forbes covers or TED Talks. Some battles had to be fought in the dark, in the quiet, in the spaces between smiles and silence. Naomi watched Gregory disappear into the back office with her credit card, her pulse steady, but her mind racing. The lobby's ambient jazz music suddenly felt too loud, the chandelier's glare too bright. She counted the seconds in her head. 27, 28, then footsteps. Gregory returned, but he wasn't alone. A uniformed police officer followed his hand resting lightly on his holster. "Ms. Carter." Gregory said, his voice slick with faux concern. "There seems to be an issue with your payment method. We'd like to verify a few details for your security." The officer stepped forward, his badge catching the light. "Mind if I ask what brings you to the city today, ma'am?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Around them, conversation stalled. The pianist missed a note. Naomi's fingers curled around her phone in her pocket. She could end this right now, call her COO, her lawyer blow up the whole charade. But then she noticed the young black couple by the elevator, their suitcases still tagged from their flight. The woman's grip tightened on her husband's arm as they watched their faces etched with a familiar dread. So Naomi played along. "Business?" she said coolly. The officer nodded, jotting something in his notepad. "And where are you staying after this?" She held his gaze. "Here, assuming my reservation hasn't suddenly vanished." A nervous titter escaped Lauren, quickly stifled. Just then, the elevator dinged. All heads turned as Marcus Johnson Horizon's VP of Operations stepped out laughing with a colleague. His smile died when he saw the scene. "Naomi." The word cracked through the lobby like a gunshot. Gregory went pale. The officer's pen froze mid-word. Marcus rushed over, but Naomi raised one hand a queen, stopping a knight. She turned to Gregory, her voice razor-sharp. "Run the card again." The silence that followed was so complete, they could hear the ice melting in a guest's abandoned drink. When the terminal finally beeped approval, Naomi plucked the card from Gregory's shaking fingers. She didn't look at him, didn't look at the officer. She walked straight to the black couple, still frozen by the elevators. "Your suite's ready," she said, pressing her key card into the woman's hand. "Complimentary champagne will be sent up." Welcome to Horizon. As the elevator doors closed on their stunned faces, Naomi finally turned to Gregory. Gather your team in the boardroom, she said so quietly only he could hear. We have a culture to burn down. Somewhere behind them, a glass shattered. No one moved to clean it up. Naomi pushed through the revolving doors, the cold evening air hitting her face like a slap. Behind her, Kevin stopped just inside the glass. His arms crossed a sentry, ensuring her exit was final. The valet stand stood empty, the attendants suddenly preoccupied elsewhere. She could feel the weight of eyes on her back, the lobby's collective breath held in uneasy silence. Then came the sound of hurried footsteps. Elena, the young employee, burst through the side door, her blazer flapping. Ma'am, wait! Her voice was barely above a whisper, frantic. She thrust a business card into Naomi's hand. My cousin works at the Times. Call this number, please. Before Naomi could respond, Elena glanced over her shoulder, her face paling. Gregory was watching from the lobby, his expression darkening. Naomi slipped the card into her pocket just as a black town car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Marcus in the back seat, his jaw set. Get in, he said. As the car pulled away, Naomi looked back at the hotel one last time. The grand facade glowed against the night sky, pristine and untouchable, but she knew better now. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the Horizon app. Your reservation at Vista Palms has been canceled per management discretion. She almost laughed. Then another buzz this time, a breaking news alert. The video from the lobby had already gone viral. The caption read, CEO of Horizon Hospitality denied entry at her own hotel. Marcus was typing furiously on his phone. We're holding an all-staff meeting at 7 a.m., he said. Legal's drafting the termination notices. Naomi stared at the city lights blurring past. No, she said quietly. Not yet. She pulled out Elena's card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. First, we let the world see what really happens behind those doors. The car turned a corner, the hotel disappearing from view, but the fire in Naomi's chest burned brighter than ever. Some battles needed more than policy changes. They needed daylight. And tomorrow, the sun would rise on a very different horizon. Naomi stood perfectly still in the lobby, her hands loose at her sides, but every muscle in Gregory's body was coiled tight. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Then, with deliberate slowness, she reached into her back pocket and pulled out a small black card, the kind reserved for Horizon's top-tier investors. She placed it on the counter with a quiet click. Gregory's eyes flicked to the card, then back to her face. His smirk faltered. Where did you get that? Before Naomi could answer, the elevator doors chimed open. A group of executives in tailored suits stepped out, their laughter dying mid-sentence as they took in the scene. At the front was Richard Vale, Horizon's largest investor. His sharp eyes landed on Naomi, then Gregory, then the black card on the counter. Naomi. Richard's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. What the hell is going on here? Gregory's mouth opened, then closed. Lauren's fingers hovered frozen above her keyboard. Kevin took an unconscious step back. Naomi kept her gaze locked on Gregory as she spoke. Mr. Vale, I was just explaining to your manager that Horizon has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. She tilted her head toward the security cameras in the ceiling corners. Fortunately, we have everything on record. Every word, every glance. Richard's face darkened. He turned to Gregory. You know who this is, don't you? Gregory's throat worked silently. The lobby had gone so quiet they could hear the ice machine humming behind the bar. Then, a crash. Elena had accidentally knocked over a tray of glasses near the front desk. The sound shattered the tension like gunfire. In the chaos, Naomi reached across the counter and plucked her credit card from the open drawer where Kevin had stashed it. She turned to leave, but not before locking eyes with Elena. The young woman gave the slightest nod, an unspoken promise. This wasn't over. As Naomi pushed through the doors, her phone buzzed. The video from the lobby had already hit 100,000 views. The caption, "When the CEO is black but doesn't belong at her own hotel." Behind her, Richard's voice carried through the glass. "Gregory Lauren, my office now." The revolving door kept spinning, but the world had already shifted on its axis. Some storms didn't just pass through, they changed the landscape forever. The first document Nia pulled from the folio wasn't a contract or legal notice, it was a photograph. She placed it face up on the counter with deliberate precision. The image showed a younger Naomi standing in front of this very hotel on its opening day, cutting the ribbon with oversized scissors. The headline beneath read, "Local entrepreneur makes history with first black-owned luxury hotel chain." Gregory's mouth went dry. Lauren made a small, choked noise. The second document was a termination notice. Nia slid it toward Gregory. "Effective immediately," she said, her voice carrying through the silent lobby. But it was the third document that made Kevin step back from the desk. A printout of the live social media feed showing the lobby scene now with over 500,000 views. The comments scrolling in real time were a damning chorus. "This is why we don't feel safe at luxury hotels. Disgusting behavior. Fire them all." Naomi finally moved, stepping forward to retrieve her card from where it lay, abandoned on the counter. As she did, the older woman in the navy coat spoke up from near the fireplace, her phone still recording. "I'd like to cancel my reservation immediately." Her voice trembled with outrage. "And I'll be taking my company's annual conference elsewhere." A murmur rippled through the guests. One by one, phones came out. Reservation cancellations pinged on front desk computers like falling dominoes. Gregory's hands shook as he reached for the termination letter. "You can't. I built this company," Naomi said quietly, "to prove that dignity isn't something you earn with a credit score or the right skin color." She turned to Elena, who stood trembling but resolute. "Pack your things. You're being promoted to interim manager." As Nia began reciting the legal next steps to the stunned staff, Naomi walked to the center of the lobby. She didn't need to raise her voice when she spoke. "To our guests, this is not the Vista Palms experience I created. All rooms tonight are complimentary, with my deepest apologies." The pianist, who had been watching silently, suddenly began playing again, an old civil rights anthem, slow and soulful. The notes filled the space where words failed. Outside, the press had already begun to arrive, but the real storm had already happened quietly, irrevocably, in the moment when one woman refused to be made small in a place she built to be grand. Naomi held the phone steady as Carla's voice filled the lobby, each word landing like a hammer. "Effective immediately, Gregory Whitmore, Lauren Chen, and Kevin Reynolds are terminated for violation of company values and discriminatory conduct." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Then came the twist no one expected. Additionally, Carla continued, "We've reviewed Elena Martinez's personnel file. Her promotion to interim general manager is now permanent with a full equity stake in this property." Elena's hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as the guests erupted in applause. But Naomi wasn't finished. She raised a hand for silence. "One more thing," she said into the phone, her voice carrying through the space. "As of today, Vista Palms is implementing a new policy. Every employee will undergo mandatory anti-bias training, and 30% of all management positions will be reserved for candidates from underrepresented communities." The older woman in the navy coat stood abruptly, her phone still recording. "That's how real change happens," she declared to the room. Her name tag, visible now, read, "Dr. Evelyn Carter, Dean of Diversity, Studies, Howard University." The coincidence wasn't lost on anyone. Gregory finally found his voice. "You can't just—" "I built this company." Naomi interrupted, her tone glacial. "I decide what happens in these walls." She turned to the stunned staff. For those who wish to stay, your new manager has your first assignment." She nodded to Elena, who stood straighter, wiping her tears. "Tonight," Elena announced, her voice gaining strength, "we're hosting a town hall, right here in this lobby, for every guest who's ever felt unwelcome in a place like this." As if on cue, the front doors swung open. Local news crews streamed in, cameras rolling. But leading the pack was a familiar face, the young Latino waiter from earlier, now holding hands with his abuela. He met Naomi's eyes and nodded. The pecan pie would be served tonight after all. Some revolutions began with protests. Others started quietly in the space between a credit card and a cold stare before blooming into something unstoppable. This was Naomi's revolution, and it was just getting started. Naomi watched as the dismissed employees shuffled out their exit, more damning than any courtroom verdict. The lobby's applause faded into a hushed anticipation, every eye fixed on the woman who had just dismantled systemic bias with nothing but truth and a phone call. Then came the moment no script could have written. From the back of the crowd, an elderly black man in a worn suit stepped forward, his cane tapping softly on the marble. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was turned away from this very hotel in 1968. Came to town for a job interview they'd already given to a white boy." He extended a trembling hand. "Never thought I'd live to see the day." Naomi took his hand in both of hers. The lobby cameras captured everything: the liver spots on his skin, the way her thumbs brushed over his knuckles with deliberate gentleness. "Sir," she said loud enough for all to hear, "your reservation is ready. The penthouse suite is yours for as long as you'd like to stay." The room erupted. Not in applause this time, but in something deeper, a collective release of decades-old pain. The pianist's tears streaming down his face began playing "Lift Every Voice and Sing." One by one, guests joined in the anthem, swelling until the crystal chandeliers trembled with the vibration. Elena, still standing shell-shocked by the concierge desk, suddenly moved with purpose. She grabbed the hotel's vintage guest book, the one reserved for VIPs, and carried it to the elderly man. "Would you do us the honor?" she asked, opening to a fresh page. His signature, shaky but proud, was the first of many that night. The book would later sell at auction for 6 figures, all proceeds funding scholarships for black hospitality students. As the cameras continued rolling, Naomi finally allowed herself one small, satisfied smile. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It would be live-streamed, tweeted, and most importantly, lived. Every check-in, every handshake, every pecan pie served would be a quiet rebellion. And Vista Palms. It would never be just a hotel again. Naomi let the silence of the boardroom settle around her like a second skin. The city lights blurred as her eyes unfocused, not seeing Atlanta's skyline, but remembering that rain-soaked night 12 years ago, the sting of rejection, the weight of a dream born in a rusted Toyota. Her fingers traced the grain of the mahogany table, this symbol of power that had once been unthinkable. A knock at the door. Elena entered, clutching 2 steaming mugs. "Thought you might need this," she said, placing one before Naomi. The rich aroma of spiced chai, not the hotel's usual premium blend, but something homier, earthier, rose between them. "You kept Abuela's recipe," Naomi observed, wrapping her hands around the warmth. Elena smiled. "Some things shouldn't change." She hesitated, then laid a folded piece of paper on the table. "The front desk just received these. Requests from guests." Naomi unfolded it to find not complaints but handwritten notes. "Make the training mandatory for all properties. Room 1124. My granddaughter wants to be a hotelier because of today. Penthouse. The pianist wants to play jazz standards by black composers in the lobby. I said hell yes. Bartender. Downstairs, the night shift moved differently. The new security team, promoted from within, greeted every guest with equal attention. Housekeeping left chocolates on pillows with handwritten cards, You belong here. The scent of pecan pie drifted from the kitchen where the young waiter and his abuela now consulted with the executive chef on a new dessert menu. Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from Richard's stock price dipped then spiked 18%, the boards calling it the accountability bump. She almost laughed. Capitalism would capitalism. But when she looked up, Elena was still standing there twisting her new manager's lanyard around her fingers. "The thing is," the young woman said quietly, "I almost didn't speak up. What if you did?" Naomi stood the chai, warming her from the inside out. "That's the only what if that matters." She gestured to the window where dawn's first light edged the horizon. "Now let's get to work. We've got a hospitality revolution to run." Somewhere below, a piano began to play. The notes floated up through the building's bones, a living, breathing promise. Not perfect, not finished, but real. And that was enough. For now, Naomi's reflection in the dark window showed the city lights behind her, like scattered stars, but her focus never wavered from the camera. The live stream counter ticked upward, 50,000 viewers, now climbing by the second. "I want to tell you about Elena." She continued, her fingers brushing the edge of the chai mug. 22 years old, first hospitality job, standing at that front desk watching her manager humiliate a guest. She could have stayed quiet, kept her head down, but she spoke 5 words that changed everything. "I don't think this is right." Downstairs, unseen by the camera, the night auditor paused her work to watch the stream on her phone. The kitchen staff gathered around a tablet dusted with flour. In the lobby, the new security team stood motionless beneath a screen, broadcasting their CEO's face. Naomi reached into her pocket and placed a worn MetroCard on the table. "This is from that night in my Honda. I keep it to remember not just the pain, but the people who looked the other way." Her thumb traced the faded magnetic strip. The clerk who followed policy. The guests who pretended not to see. The ones who could have said something but didn't. The chat exploded. "My sister got fired for reporting discrimination at her hotel. I'm a GM in Chicago. We're watching this with my whole staff. Make this required training industry-wide." A notification popped up. Richard again. "CNN wants an interview. So does Oprah." Naomi swiped it away. "Here's what happens next," she said, leaning forward. "Every Vista Palms property will have anonymous spot checks by diverse mystery shoppers. Every employee, including executives, will retake bias training quarterly. And starting tomorrow," she tapped her phone, and every device in the company pinged simultaneously with a new app notification. "This is our real-time reporting system. See something, say something. No more HR runarounds, no more buried complaints." Somewhere in Atlanta, a night shift hotel maid watching on her cracked screen began to cry. In Dallas, a black concierge showed the stream to his white manager. The revolution wasn't just televised, it was interactive, unfolding in real time across 1,000 screens. Naomi ended the stream with 3 quiet words, such as "stay uncomfortable, friends." The camera light blinked off. The boardroom door opened to reveal Elena holding 2 suitcases, one designer, one thrift store vintage. "Your idea worked," she said. "They're ready for you downstairs." Because the real test began now, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments after, when the cameras were off, when the world wasn't watching, when it was just one woman walking into another hotel, suitcase in hand, to see if the lesson had truly been learned. Naomi stepped out of the boardroom into a hallway transformed. The staff had lined both walls, housekeepers in uniform, valets still wearing their gloves, kitchen staff with aprons dusted in flour. No applause, no fanfare, just silent solidarity as she passed each person, meeting her eyes with a quiet promise. "We see you. We're with you." At the elevator, Elena pressed the button for the lobby instead of the penthouse. "You'll want to see this," she said softly. The doors opened to reveal the grand lobby, now alive with unexpected energy. The pianist played a soulful rendition of A change is gonna come. Guests, black, white, Asian, Latino, sat together at the bar, deep in conversation, instead of staring at their phones. The new security team, a diverse mix of men and women, moved through the space, not as enforcers, but as hosts. Near the fireplace, the elderly man from earlier sat with a young Latino waiter and his abuela, the three of them sharing pecan pie from the same plate. When he spotted Naomi, he raised his fork in salute, his eyes bright with something that looked like peace. Nia appeared at her side, holding out a phone. It's trending nationwide. What would you have done is the top hashtag. Major chains are reaching out to adopt our reporting system. Naomi scrolled through the feed a teacher in Detroit showing the video to her class. A white couple checking out of a competitor's hotel mid-stay. A viral clip of a black family being welcomed at a Vista Palms in Seattle. The front desk clerk saying warmly, "We've been expecting you." Elena touched her arm gently. "There's one more thing." She led Naomi to the front desk where the vintage guest book lay open. Beneath the elderly man's signature were hundreds more names, dates, and short messages stretching back pages. "He started it," Elena explained. "Guests have been signing all night. That couple from Chicago, they wrote, 'We'll never stay silent again.'" The bartender added, "See the person, not the policy." Naomi ran her fingers over the entries, the ink still fresh. This wasn't just a guest book anymore. It was a living manifesto. As dawn's first light filtered through the windows, the night shift and day shift staff stood together behind the front desk, ready for whatever came next. The lobby doors opened to reveal a surprising sight, reporters. Yes, but also a line of new guests checking in early. Among them, a young black woman in a simple sweater, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Naomi caught her eye and smiled. No words were needed. The girl in the car had finally come home. Some revolutions began with speeches. Others started in silence in the space between a question asked and an answer lived. This was Naomi's answer, and the world was just beginning to hear it.